This is
Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome back. So, if you are a mom of a toddler, you probably spent hours or even months watching that little cute baby face,
mm,
waiting for those first words to click. All right. But, like learning colors and numbers, it's actually super complex, the physical feat of learning to speak. So, today we're going to talk about the biology of talking, and we're going to dive into a method called prompt, which is a unique hands on approach to treat speech not as a thought, but a motor skill. So, joining me is Jennifer Gordon, a speech language pathologist and prompt expert. And we're going to talk about why some kids they struggle to map the movements of their mouth, what actually is happening behind the scenes as your toddler tries to say mama. And simply let's just take a look at how we can help you at home help your kid find their voice. So, Jennifer Gordon, welcome to the show.
hi. Thanks for having me.
I'm looking forward to it. I actually, if it's cool with you, I would like to. Speech is a big deal because the
Mhm.
minute they start saying words, you're like, oh my gosh, they're real human. Okay.
Yeah.
So, can we kind of walk through the biology of a word? What's actually happening with the toddler's jaw, lip,
Yep.
tongue to actually make a sound?
Yeah. And it's a good question because I think we don't often think about speech as being a motor movement for some reason, even though it is just like learning to walk or ride a bike. Learning to talk it's a very complex motor skill, but we think of it more just kind of, kids just sort of pick up on it. But yes, there's a lot involved and, moving from beginning with our brain and coming up with a message and the word we want to say, and then having that message go down to our what we call the articulators. So those are the parts of our face, our mouth that we use for speech. So like you said, jaw, lips, and tongue. So when we have a word like mama, which a lot of, we like when the babies start with the word mama, but they often start with, but regardless, both of those are very, what we would say, jaw driven words. We're opening and closing the mouth, right? Dad, dad, mama. And that's typically how children begin to develop speech. That's the first part of our facial muscles that they use for speech. It's the easiest. They can use kind of big movements. They don't need any of that refinement that comes as kids get older. So for a word like mama, like you said, it's not just opening and closing. It's also, we have to close our jaw. We have to close our lips. We have to turn on voicing for We have to use our nose for because that's considered a nasal sound. And then we have to open our jaw for the vowel and then close again and keep our mouth closed. Mom, what will that be for mom? For mama, we can open back up. So it's just so much more involved than just saying, just imitating a word. There is all those pieces that you have to put together. Closing our mouth, opening our mouth, turning on our voice, turning on our nasality. So it's not as easy as it seems.
It seems like there's a lot of connector pieces. And so I remember being told, oh, their brain is working faster than their face. So the words, the way they're saying their words, it comes out in like a string of different language almost. And then I know you're trying to say something, but it's like coming out too fast or your brain's working too fast and your mouth can't keep up. What's that situation?
I mean, yeah, a lot of time with babbling. Do you mean kind of when babies
Yeah,
are?
it's basically babbling. Like they're making a proclamation. Like they'll stand up
Yeah.
on their toy and like pronounce, but it's just
Yeah.
crazy talk.
I mean, and babies, they learn from us, right? Like we are their models. And that's why we always say it's so important to be talking to them all day long rather than just having them in the playpen playing with their toys and, you're doing something. I mean, obviously that happens. It happens for me too. But as much as we can, we want to be down on the floor interacting with them, even when they're babies, because the babbling, they're mimicking our, the rise and fall of our speech, the sound of our speech. So they're hearing our conversations and they're imitating that and they're practicing, and we call it vocal play. They're practicing moving their mouth, making their sounds, and then they're modeling kind of the way that we're doing it. So when they, babble like, then we respond to something that we think maybe they were saying, just to kind of begin to teach them that these sounds have meanings, the words have meanings. But that's kind of the first stepping stone, the babbling. And then that will transition into some real meaningful words and approximations.
Okay. And then for some kids, and there's some families that I know too, that have speech delays. So let's just say none of their kids even began even the babble talk or anything until 2 years old. So what does that mean? Is that, and I want to say this in like air quotes of like laziness or not wanting to talk. Like I'm thinking parents are thinking that there's a problem or whatever the case is,
Yeah.
but what is that? Like, is it a motor issue? Is it more of a developmental issue? I don't know. What is that?
Yeah. Well, and it could be It's hard to know. It could be any of those things. There are those developmental milestones, and we kind of use them as guidance to determine when or if we want to get our child looked at further. And this is always kind of where I caution parents too, because I think sometimes not every pediatrician for sure, but sometimes pediatricians can push a little bit of that, like, oh, they'll catch up, the kind of wait and see approach, which sometimes that's true. Sometimes kids are truly just late talkers, especially I see that sometimes like in third and fourth children when they have a bunch of siblings around them that are talking for them and they don't have that opportunity or that, exposure to parents like the way the firstborn does. But certainly, by 1 year old, we want to be seeing at least one meaningful word. It doesn't have to be a real word. It can be, ba for ball, but something that they use consistently that has meaning. And by 2, it bumps up so much. I mean, the 18 months, we want to have like 50 words. By 2, we're pushing 100 words. So the range gets pretty big. I always say, like, if your child is not necessarily hitting those milestones, it can't hurt to have them looked at by a professional, because sometimes kids do catch up on their own, but if they don't, that you're missing such a critical period where they can be learning, because the early intervention piece can make such a difference for kids that are having a little bit of a delay.
Absolutely. And I guess the question would be more of, especially for a first time parent, how do you differentiate? Like, how do you, is there anything that could be like, let's just say they're not saying anything at 1, but they will mimic your mouth movements, but they don't make noises yet. Like, I guess I would say, like, how would you know to be like, oh, this is a wait and see situation, or this is you need to start now?
Yeah, I think it can be hard to know. That's why I think if you're on the fence, I think it can help just to reach out to somebody and get even a consult just to kind of talk things over. But, one, if your child's not saying anything, a lot of times we could give you just kind of suggestions, and I could go over some suggestions that we tell parents, like some things to try at home. And then, if at 18 months we're not seeing enough of that growth, then it's like, okay, let's get in for a real evaluation with a therapist. And maybe they just need a little bit more support in that area.
We are unsure, but we're going to get this checked out. And so we are now interested in prompt, because we're like, okay, I would love to work with their biology and the physiology of their face and of their speaking. So where does prompt come in with this, and what does that mean? And how does that work into the therapy that you would provide, assuming the child needed it?
Yeah. So prompt, it's a very powerful therapy technique that I have found. But in general, it's geared more towards what we call motor speech delays, which is a little bit different than just the typical child who's coming in, maybe that we think of in speech therapy, that can't say their S's or their R's. Motor speech impairments are related more when there's the brain knows what it wants to say. There's no weakness in our muscles, but there's a disconnect along the way. And so the motor planning is off, there's difficulty there. And so prompt is a technique that helps retrain the muscles of the face, the articulators that we talked about, to create those more appropriate motor plans for sounds and words. So prompt itself is a tactile approach. So tactile
means touch, right? Tactile means touch.
Yep,
okay.
Yep. There are actual prompts that we use on the child's face for each sound. But it's not necessarily looking at sounds like we do when we say, okay, this kid needs help with their R's. We're going to work on R and words and R in sentences. It's looking at movements. It's a shift in thinking, and it was definitely a shift in thinking for me. But, okay, this child's dropping off all of their final sounds. Why is that happening? I'm not going to be looking just at what sounds are they dropping. I'm going to be looking at why are they dropping final sounds? And a lot of times that is related to the movement pattern. So if there is, for a word like mop or mom, if they're saying ma and they can't get that final sound, well, then we're going to be working on their jaw, because they're unable to close their jaw. So it's different. It's a different approach, because we're looking at movement versus just single sounds. And that can be, but back to what you were saying with getting checking on things early and getting intervention early, children with motor speech disorders, they benefit so much from early intervention. So if you suspect your child might be having difficulties like that, or one of the most common things that we work on with prompt is called apraxia, and that's a motor speech disorder. And those kids, they benefit so much from getting that early intervention and from getting a treatment approach like prompt.
Okay, so just from what you were saying, as parents, we'd be looking for, if my child is not closing their jaw, at the end of saying words, or like what else should we be looking for?
Yeah, so that's just an example of kind of
Yeah.
how the treatment would be different. But some of the red flags or markers of a motor speech delay or difficulty versus more of a traditional articulation approach are things like they have a really hard time imitating, or they imitate differently every time. Maybe they say appa for apple and then they say papa for apple the second time. They can't, there's inconsistency. A lot of times there's difficulties with vowels, which is not really very common in traditional speech therapy. That's another thing to look out for. They have a hard time with stress patterns. So they might stress the wrong part of the word, like banana. They might, banana. They might stress the wrong syllable. Their speech can sound very choppy. So they have a really difficult time kind of moving between sounds. And that kind of leads to choppy or robotic sounding speech. So those are just kind of some of the things to look for that would suggest that maybe there was a little bit more going on.
Okay. And then using the prompt method, how are you helping your child? What are you doing? Are you saying, breathe in first, like use your breath? Like, what are you doing? How are we working with this?
Well, it's hard. I mean, it's a little hard to explain because it's dependent on every child.
Okay.
But in general, with prompt, we're looking at a hierarchy of skills.
Okay.
Beginning with breath. Yes. Beginning with breath support. So if I have a child, for instance, who's really just having a hard time even initiating sound, like, some of those nonverbal children, will work on turning on their airflow, so just turning on their voice. And then it moves up the system, honestly. So then we work on jaw control, and then we move up to lips. So we're working on those p, b, sounds. And then we're working on tongue sounds. And then we're working on putting it all together. So it is a hierarchy, and it follows basically how children develop. That's how we develop typical speech. They, like I said, they start with those big babbling movements, and then suddenly they have a little bit more control. And now they can say banana. And then, now they can say car, so it bumps up and as they get, like I said, more refined and older also. But it's hard because each child that we see is going to have different breakdowns in their system. And we have to identify where the breakdowns are happening. And then that's where the therapy comes in. But the touch cues are pretty cool because there's research to suggest that, there's neurons right under our skin. And I think I saw I was looking at one of your clips before, you might want to take that out, but about the neuroplasticity of children's brains, particularly children. They have that ability to change. And by providing their system, their face with that touch cue, we're helping them develop those new motor maps. So we're teaching them, instead of going ba, we're going to close your mouth here. This is where it should be at the end of a word. And we're providing them with auditory, sound. We're talking to them, we're showing them, and we're letting them feel. We can create new motor maps by accessing the face like that.
Okay. So you're stimulating the neurons through your hands and your tactile feeling as you are going through these techniques to get them to learn how to say that exact word. And so therefore it's going to connect the brain to that area of their mouth or their face with jaw, whatever it is. So that's really interesting. So what would you say is the most exciting thing or like exciting case that you've had using the prompt? Because you said you're like, it's new, I think, for me, but it's been really effective. So can you kind of give a story or a case study?
In general, I think like looking back at the beginning of my career, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's kids that I wasn't treating correctly, that I missed, that this would have been more effective with her.
Yeah.
But so I currently see a little boy with cerebral palsy.
Okay.
And he came to me with, basically he could kind of vocalize, but not without any meaning. He had some, like that, but no other words, but smart, understands everything. And so we just kind of started working on just closing. He came in with an open mouth. So his mouth was always kind of just open a little bit. We worked on that jaw lip closure, and we started just with, and then we progressed to like mom, ma, mama. And that was so exciting.
Absolutely. I'm sure it brought the mother to tears, right?
His mother is the best, and she's at every appointment. And just to kind of watch the progression of not knowing what to do with his musculature to having the control to say such a meaningful word. That was very exciting.
That's so cool. It's basically like this prompt method is providing the map for the brain to get to the parts of the face to learn how to use the brain and the face together to make those sounds. So that's really
Exactly.
interesting, really cool. And I'm hopeful that all these parents who are listening right now, like if you have a child that's learning to talk, there are obviously effective ways to help them. And so what would be your recommendation? Like if you have a toddler right now that is in that process, what are some helpful tips just for generalization of what we should be doing as parents to help support them and help guide them so that they can be successful in their journey of speaking?
Yeah. I mean, I think a big thing is, like I said, with little ones, talking to them. I mean, even if you're talking to yourself, but you are just sort of narrating your day or narrating what's going on, that we have to talk to them. We have to read to them. That's how they learn. But then as they're getting older and we're starting to see some of the language come in, a big thing that I tell parents, because parents get really hung up on, they know their colors or they know their numbers and they get, that's really important. And that those things are important. But what we want more importantly, especially in the younger years, is more functional speech. So we want to work on having them make requests and be able to tell you what they want or be able to tell you what they don't want. And so I'm always encouraging parents to try not to just anticipate kids' needs and to try to give them opportunities to speak and to make requests. So don't just go and give them their cup of milk, or don't just go and give them, a snack you think they want. Open the cabinet and let them, point to it, let them vocalize it. If they're not vocalizing it, you have to model it. You have to say, if they're looking at the chips, chips, and then you kind of wait. It's a lot of waiting. You're modeling and you're waiting, and then you're giving them opportunities to imitate. When we want to really avoid saying, say this, say chips, because research has shown that puts pressure on kids and they're less likely to say it. So I am modeling, giving words to the things that they're doing, naming the things that they're doing. Wait time, really big, giving them, even if you say it and you wait and it seems uncomfortable, just do it. Because, I was just doing this morning with my son. We had the car and we're going ready, set, go. And then you're letting the car go, ready, set, go, letting the car go. And then you say ready, set, and then you wait and you see if they'll vocalize at all, So just giving them opportunities. And it's so hard in a day because you're running a million places, and it's easier as moms just to be like, here's your thing. But especially if you have concerns, try to just sort of slow down or try to find one part of the day, whether it's mealtime or bath time, where you create some opportunities for them to need to use their voice.
No, those are great ideas. I remember being like, look at my face and like pointing to my chin and
That's
like,
also good. Yes.
say the words.
On their level. So that's why mealtime's another good one, because they're in the chair and you're there.
Yes.
I'm always working with my son on like trying baby signs.
Baby signs are great
baby
too.
signs. Yes. Because kids can learn them before words. So that's an awesome thing. So we're always working on more and all done. So yeah, those are just a few ideas.
Absolutely. And I think it's not just about speech, it's about communication in general, which is why I think you're saying like it's great that they know their numbers and their colors, but you want them to be able to communicate, because we know a frustrated toddler that can't communicate is not a fun toddler. So
Absolutely.
we want to really focus on that. And I think there is something to be said about, like you're saying, if there's an issue, for sure, when you have an intention, you need to give it attention. So fine, if something's going on, it's not a problem until it's a problem. If something's going on, then you have to give it attention and give it time and space, which means taking the time to wait, doing the right prompts, things along those lines. So, I think all of that advice was great. My final question to you is, for all the parents listening, I end my podcast this way. What is the good news about what you do and what's going on with kids talking right now? What's the good news?
Yeah. I mean, I think the good news is just that these kids can make progress, that we see it every day, that you just said, if you give it the attention, and whether it's you or a professional or both, and, the kids are making progress. So if you find an approach that works for you, if you find a therapist that you trust, the biggest thing I think is making sure that whoever you're working with or whatever you're doing at home it's fun and it's functional for kids. And then they're going to make progress and you're going to see those changes. It's, we always see kids improving. And I think that's the most exciting thing about what we do, is they make improvements every day.
That is very true. And I do think there is something to be said about functional intention, because that is what's going to have them be successful, not even in your home, but out in the world. So when they're at daycare or at school or on the playground, like that's super important. They want to feel confident that they can communicate out in the world. So that's the whole point, right?
Yes.
All right. So tell us about where you are, what you're doing, how we can get a hold of you if we want to get a hold of Jennifer Gordon and the speech language pathologist. Let us know.
Yeah. So I have my own private practice. So I am in Fort Washington. which is I see kids out of my house actually. So that's really nice. And I see kids one-on-one, which I very highly recommend. Doesn't, whoever you are, wherever you're seeing a specialist, if you can create a relationship with your child and a therapist, it's going to go a long way. So one-on-one therapy with the same provider is really nice. I am on Facebook. My company is Gordon Pediatric Speech Therapy, but I'm on Instagram as Gordon Speech, and I'm on Facebook as Gordon Pediatric Speech Therapy.
Okay, so I will post all of that in the notes too, and include links and all that information. And Jennifer, thank you so much for being on my show and for just giving some expert advice on helping parents with their kids and if they have speech and just understanding in general how we are even speaking. Like, just to know that there's more than just the words coming out of our mouth. It's like a whole connection. And also, I love the hope of that neuroplasticity, and that even if something were to change for us, that like we can stimulate our neurons and we can help our brain make connections even without it being internalized. You use external fingers to help set up that new pathway, which is really cool. And that was my big takeaway today. I think I really like that. That was the best thing that you said for me today. But I'm sure there's plenty other that parents are like, oh, this is exactly what I need. So if you need help, and reach out to Jen, and you'll see everything in the show notes. Thank you everybody for joining the show, and have a great day.
Thank you.